Welcome. This is the PunkCX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. On the podcast, I seek out and interview entrepreneurs, leading business people, authors, tech leaders, academics, and generally cool people doing interesting stuff in the service and experience space. Check out the archive at adrianswinsko.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the PunkCX podcast. With me today, I have Nikola Mrkšić, CEO of PolyAI. I hope you haven't butchered his name. So you will correct me, but Nikola, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And then that was a pretty good rendition. So, your show is pretty spot on.
I'll try. And I get an A star for trying at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nikola, for the benefit of our listeners and also maybe some of the folks that kind of listen to the highlights or read the highlights, can you give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on you, the work that you and the work that you do?
Yeah. So I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of PolyAI, and we build voice agents for customer service. Right? We are trying to help companies be the best version of themselves by picking up the phone anytime of day or night in whatever language. And by just building AI systems that can do the work of thousands of people. And that just gives companies superpowers by helping them do more for their end customers through the phone, through other channels. And the ethos is very much just how do you get them to be a better company, not a blind kind of like attempt to help them save money.
Perfect. And there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about on the podcast, and particularly around sort of dig into some of the voice AI stuff. But initially, I wanted to set the context and I think that, and I wanted to do that by sort of asking you about some of the research that you recently published that which found that the phone still reigns in customer service. Now, this is a thing that keeps coming up, and some people say, voice is dead or phone's dead, and then people are like, oh, phones are making a comeback, or and so on and so forth. And it swings back and forward. So I wanted to ask you to tell me about the research and what the main findings are, because just to kind of set the context a little bit.
Absolutely. So, when I started the company, it was 2017, and it was very much the age of like people thinking that chatbots will take over customer service and all kind of like, interaction with brands. And, the narrative at a very high level was only older people call, and young people will never pick up the phone. And I think it's a classic kind of like Silicon Valley going to extreme towards a completely imagined future, not even grounded in data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened in the meantime is a lot of companies put a lot of work into creating powerful digital channels, whether it's like self-serve pages all the way to like chatbots. And you could even say that automated voice is a digital experience. It absolutely is, but the modality matters. So let's not put it in the same bucket, right? Because that's kind of what we do. And then really when it played out, companies managed to shrink call volumes, but frankly, just not picking up the phone. Because if you call and I pick up quickly with a well-trained agent versus you call and I leave you on hold, and for two minutes I tell you that you can do everything online, and our lines are busy because of this and that, and did you know that this, and did you know that, and I just do everything possible to deter you from calling. Well, what I'm really doing is deflection, where I'm kind of like hoping to find a different way to do it, or you decide that you don't have to talk to me after all. That's not a good customer experience. If you as a brand have that experience and your competitor picks up immediately with a really well-trained agent, like they win. They keep business more, they upsell more, they're long-term regarded as the better brand, a more customer-centric brand. So call volumes did go down somewhat, right? But voice never went away as a channel. It remained the dominant channel, right? You look at large telcos, large banks, large utility companies, and we're talking about 5, sometimes 10,000 plus agents still there, right?
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I want to go back to one of the points you made. You talked about people making big assumptions about the only people that really kind of like pick up the phone are like older people.
Yep.
this is here's the thing that kind of like bugs me about all that sort of stuff, and it's the same in most, if you like, Western economies. I think it's probably the same in most Western economies, is that most of the older people have all the money,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
yet they get the crappiest service.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when you look at a lot of the like premium products and things, they don't, right? Like there's a large pool of private banks, wealth management, etc., where the same person picks up your phone call if you've got some wealth, right?
Right.
So they don't have a debate of like, are people going to do this long term? They just pick up the phone because it makes sense and it's good business,
Yeah.
right?
They know
Uh,
that good business is driven by personal sort of connections.
But you mentioned our research, right? And what's been really striking is that um, Gen X and then especially millennials, the propensity for voice does shrink.
Right.
And if you think about it, like say, I'm a millennial. We've been exposed the most to these deflections, and we don't have the money, so we're not going to be fast tracked, right? So what then happens is you start erring on the side of really trying to self-serve rather than going into waiting for half an hour on the phone.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing flipped on its head because Gen Z didn't grow up with the browser or, well, with a laptop and a browser, right? Like millennials did. They grew up with the phone and TikTok, and they send voice notes to each other a whole lot more, right? So when we survey people for like um, preference for voice, and the preference for voice sticks among all generations
Mm-hmm.
to a different extent. But with Gen Z, you see a jump up from millennials in the likelihood to pick up the phone and call and wanting to do that because they're actually much more kind of like oriented. And even when you look at people who are, heavy gamers and spend a lot of time online, and you think of them as your traditional, hermit type who might not want to, have human interaction, they're on social media. They're talking to people nonstop while gaming. When I grew up and played computer games, you didn't have a voice channel
That's
between all the players. Now it comes like built into most computer games for
Yeah, and
multiple.
it's like I think the lesson there is like if you listen to anybody some of these young folk that are playing, or anybody that you speak to anybody who's into sort of multiplayer sort of games, and they'll go for gaming sessions that will be hours, sometimes days long,
Yeah,
in sort of extreme cases, and they're talking all of the time.
yeah,
So the lesson from it is like going, they talk, they like to talk, they're just not talking to you.
yeah. Twitch, Discord, etc. They are very oriented towards that live human interaction, right? And because of that, when they use these things in the real world, like that clunky chatbot on your webpage never really saw much traffic anyway. There are application first experiences, like say Revolut, where they've been dogmatic about insisting on chat because, and I think it comes from a good place. They believe that they will serve their customers better if they limit it to that channel and build everything around the channel so that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And they commit to fixing problems quickly because they might not have, 100 agents to spend time on the phone teaching people how to do something, so they have to make the UX better. I think that's legit, right?
Yeah, no,
But
completely. I completely get that. I mean, it's like I think there's a fallacy in the idea that many brands fall into, is that they're going, oh, we have to be everywhere that our customers are at, and then you end up doing is you end up going, we spread ourselves almost too thin with no depth in any particular kind of channel. But I think there's also, the secret hiding in plain sight when Revolut's obviously done it, as is some of the other major kind of brands that we like to hold out, is that they're going, we're going to be great here, here, and here, and we're not going to be anywhere else. And if you don't like it, well, but we told you, but we're going to be great over here. And as long as we deliver great over here, then we will travel digitally for better service, because we know where better service kind of exists.
Yep, exactly.
And so we do it in the physical world. So why wouldn't we do it in the digital world? Because it's easier to move, right? But and many people don't get that, or don't actually leverage that, and they get caught in this sort of like proud herd chasing sort of behavior.
Yep.
So, but so the research established that actually voice is popular. In fact, of anything, it's the voice, I guess, millennials and Gen Xers have learned through experience or been trained by
Yeah,
bad experiences.
Yeah, I mean, one flip side to like adoption of chat, and brands really kind of like it really depends what question you ask, right? So if you go like which generations use chat the most, it would be Gen X and millennials. But the real question is like, out of those forced to interact with a brand through
Mhm.
chat versus voice, who does the best, right? And you look at like the older generation versus like a 30-year-old. Like, yeah, on average, a 30-year-old is more likely to somehow find what they're looking for or do what they have to through that chat interaction. Maybe it's human powered, right? And they're doing it to cut costs. They're doing it to, um, like they have their motivations. It's
Sure,
mostly cost, right?
sure.
And they have more success doing it. It doesn't mean they like it.
No, no, that's kind of fair. It's like it was almost we've been trained to do that because that's where we kind of like we've discovered we're actually likely to get the best
Yep.
outcomes. But
Yep.
if given the choice, we would possibly choose different.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because sometimes you can say, oh, well, that obviously indicates preference. And you're like, going, well, no, there's a preference and then there's the forced choice or learned choice,
Yep.
which is kind of interesting. So, anything else that came out of the research that you wanted to kind of highlight? Because there was also kind of when we were talking and setting up the podcast, there was a couple other kind of things that I wanted to dig into, just ideas around the surround us, but other things in the research that you want to pick up on.
Well, it's really like that's the main highlight that voice is in fashion, that people are calling, and that there's increasingly far more adoption and expectation that a good voice digital channel, people will engage. I think we have started turning the trend on people just immediately screaming operator, operator, operator.
Mm-hmm.
They reach a voice assistant. So the game is on. You get to be a better company by deploying this technology. And when I started PolyAI, and we're 5 years ago when I was having these conversations, like that wasn't obvious. Now there's a lot more understanding that like, all right, I guess it is coming. We didn't know if it was 50 years in the future or 3 years in the future. I guess it's now. Like, where do we start? And as a founder of a company that's now scaling very aggressively, I'm very thankful that that moment has come to be.
Yeah, stuck with it, and then now it's the kind of the market's come to you.
Timing is everything, right?
Yeah,
So yeah.
and so when we were talking and setting this up, you also mentioned an idea about making the contact or call center into a command center, and I thought, well, that's kind of aligned with some of my own thing, and I wanted to ask you to explain what you mean by that because I think it's an interesting idea, and I've been advocating for the importance of the contact center as an insight machine for the longest kind of time, but I wanted to hear somebody else kind of like bang that drum or kind of give me a perspective on it.
Of course, of course. Well, look, I think that like we're working through companies building that first layer of automation where much of the work of the tier one customer service rep will be automated. And I think the limit of it, 90% of it will be automated. Now, what that means is, you'll get to do a lot more work in the contact center and you'll be more efficient, sure. You'll also provide more consistent service and all the kind of like immediate benefits that you can imagine, right? Now, when you go past that first layer of automation, now you have an AI hive mind speaking to your customers and dealing with most of the issues, right? So rather than kind of like having the usual, and contact centers, and to those that maybe haven't been in one, there's usually a giant screen with like, average waiting time, abandon percentage, like things that are kind of like saying, hey, the the um, the blood pressure is like going up, like you need to do something about it, right? The bands are getting high or waiting times are low. They'll have other like efficiency metrics, but you only really look at those after you know that you're in the clear from the service level. Like, are you picking up 90% of the calls within 1 minute? Like, these are the kinds of things that are like the top level priority for the contact center manager on the ground going like, damn, I need to call more people in because,
Yeah.
right? It's a very tactical job on a daily level, right? And very strategic if you get to do it on like a longer time horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if like all of a sudden you see a spiking of the call volume, right? The usual thing that the business will do is say, well, the contact center, their average handling time is going up, so maybe the agents are not well trained enough. And it's like these theoretical discussions when then they go, oh, can we buy some software to analyze user sentiment, see how it changed? And these are like very indirect metrics, right? It's kind of like saying if I pop 4 of these Red Bulls and my heart rate goes up, it's like, does Nikola need to eat better? Like, yeah, but like the immediate cause here is that I've just had 4 Red Bulls. So it'd be weird if my heart rate wasn't up, right? Similarly, if you have an AI hive mind interacting with your customers, you get to talk to the data set and you go, hey, what's going on? Well, what the AI can tell immediately is that what's going on is that everyone from, I don't know, the north of England has started calling you about being overcharged for their bill in April. And you're like, oh, wait, what happened? And I'm like, no, the cook, like, is it like you always get billing issues?
Yeah.
Well, like, how many? Oh, 1,000 times as many as yesterday. Okay, that's the point where head of the contact center calls the CEO, who calls someone else and says, hey, we've got like a bit of a shit show in Manchester and Newcastle because we overcharged everyone by a factor of 5. So let's send text messages, let's send emails, let's maybe even change that greeting message before you get to the voice agent, right? To say, hey, we're aware of the billing issues in Manchester, stay put, you'll be hearing from us, right? You do that, you've solved the issue. You've solved it in a matter of like probably 30, 60 minutes, right? And anecdotally, will you feel and hear the same thing before it happens at a huge scale? Not really, right? So the idea there is you can kind of like go and say, hey, the business, like all that conversation that we're having, like we're feeding you something back that is very actionable immediately, right? And that's what we mean when we say command center. The other thing we mean is like, at a very high level, the job of that person is to like provide the best possible service with the budget that they've been allotted. If they're lucky, when the automation brings these benefits, they get to keep the same budget and make the experience better rather than just like, cutting the budget to keep it wherever it is today, right? But they get to trade on that curve. And that's different at different times of year, for instance, right? Where let's say that you are a delivery company, like inevitably you will be fast tracking people who are the senders who paid for the shipment versus the recipients who didn't pay for it, right? At least not directly. So certain times of year, you might prioritize one category over the other, right? And you get to set those rules so that, I don't know, if someone is trying to churn as a customer, you're probably putting them to your best agents because you're trying to keep them, right? So like, you'll want to keep your capacity for the most important calls, the human capacity, higher, right? So when you have double the call volume, you get to say, okay, now like difficulty setting level 3 for callers because they have to, right? But you get to kind of like control how the experience changes for different groups, right? And it also means that basically if you have enough stuff, you don't have to necessarily hand off if they're asking about something that they could read online, right? You shouldn't just, when you're really swamped, you might send them a URL or that explanation over text and like end the call, right? Whereas on another day, you might actually pass them to a human. But like enabling the visibility and then the control over these decisions is how you create a far better experience.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I mean, then the other thing that that you mentioned, you were talking about, well, like you're talking about possibly railing against this idea that some people talk about voice channels being relics of the past, and some people are talking about retiring the kind of voice kind of channels.
Yeah.
But do you think that's a mistake? Or explain what you mean when you were kind of talking about that. Okay, what are the implications of retirement? I understand it's like the implications, the simple implications are where you choose not to interact in that sort of way. There's other bigger implications.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think it's okay to have a hypothesis of what the future world will look like. That's okay. But you're a larger business and you have customers to serve. And they have certain expectations that you as a business have committed to providing a service and a product to them, right? How you feel the world will look in the future has little to do with the commitment you have taken upon yourself, right? So you turning off the voice channel suits you. It may create a better experience for the customer, but it is on you to prove that by showing that the adoption is there, right? I think if you get to a 90-10 split and then you're willing to frankly piss off some customers and provide a service that is different from what they had initially signed up for, that is your prerogative. You can do that. You may lose them as customers, right? But you've seen it happen over and over again, and now it's just become comical, right? You get, I think it was Spirit Airlines that said that they would not have a
was it
channel.
Spirit?
Then
Was it
HMRC.
Alaska? No, or Alaska?
I don't know if it was.
There was one airline that turned off all their phones.
Yeah, I think Spirit was the one. Then famously here in the UK, HMRC every year goes and announces that they're gonna shut off their contact center, which has I think over 10,000 people in it, right? And then they backtrack in a matter of days. It's not even weeks. Right?
I tell you what, I had an experience with kind of HMRC, and I tell you what, it's like you try and figure something out, but then when you get to that kind of point where, and invariably, anytime you're talking to the HMRC or any kind of like complex organization that's dealing with complex kind of like, rules and obligations and all these different sort of things, then it's hard to design a digital experience to be able to solve for all those nuances.
Absolutely.
And then you get to a certain point and you speak to somebody and go, oh, I see how that works. Yeah, fine, let me go sort this out. I'll check with this back again and kind of like, if it's all sorted, then it's like nothing else to do.
Yeah. And look, I think that it is perfectly legitimate to build as much of a digital experience. And in the limit of things, it can even be better, right? But you do it by building that command center, right? Which is you launch and you know that maybe the 10 top call volumes are self-assessment, this flow, that flow, the reporting of, I don't know, deferred taxes, capital gain. I don't know the top 10 use cases, right? You build those out and you make it very easy to escalate to a human. Every time you escalate, you capture why you escalated. Now you have an automation roadmap grounded in data over what's actually going on versus like some abstract idea of what it is. And you build and you build and you build. And, at some point you will have designed an experience where 50% of the people are willingly opting in to do it, right? Because the alternative will be going and waiting for 7 minutes for a human or 30 minutes, 2 hours, right? So, as they wait, they'll get bored. Maybe they'll call and they'll try it again. And you'll win them back like from a good position of strength where then they'll go. And, we have so many calls where people go, wait. I just have to say this is the best automated experience I've ever had. Like, kudos to you guys. I heard that in a call like 2 years ago. My heart was full. I was like, that's it. And I have a lot of conviction in this because we've made it happen for companies. And it's not easy. And the scale of something like HMRC, it's a multi-year project. So, if they want to, I think Donald Trump has recently given us a case study of kind of like, I'm going to cut costs. And to do that, I'm going to, fire indiscriminately. And then you basically incur more cost because you do things that don't necessarily make sense.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there was really interesting what you say there is like you see some companies that as you say, that Spirit or HMRC, then they talk about, we're going to turn off the voice channel and we're going to go completely digital, self-service, and then they roll back on that very, very quickly. And I think the thing that based on what you were saying, I think the thing that's really interesting that they're dismissing is the fact that when you turn off the voice channel, then you turn, like as you said, you turn off this data capture, real-time data capture, and insight kind of machine, or at least kind of channel that goes, that maps us. So we're not guessing, we're working in real-time kind of data that goes, we can map here's our automation kind of like workflow that we need to kind of build. And we do that kind of one at a time. You go like, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that one, I'm going to do that one and that one. And you blah, 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 build. And then you keep building. Because here's the thing, is like, the world is not becoming more simple. The world is becoming more complex. And the more things that you add, and guess what? We don't reduce the number of legislation and tax rules and all these other kind of things that we have. If anything, we add to it more. We create more complexity. So the need to keep building and keep capturing insight is always going to be there, unless you're like one company selling one product to one group of people, and then you're good. But show me a company that does that sustainably over time, and I'll show you kind of a simple kind of digital self-service automation kind of case study.
Yep. No, I mean, look, it's complicated, and I think that like You can't have it overnight. You're gonna have to do a lot of work to build it. And we talk about building the command center as like you're building the cognitive functions of your kind of like level 2 agents, and kind of like we have different names for it. But like above your kind of like tier 1, you're gonna have your coaching agents, and these will be your humans handling both the escalation and the management of the AI, much like they sample a percentage of calls and just common sense check that people are doing the right things and not doing anything terribly. They'll be checking technology, right? And making sure that the system hasn't gone off the rails, or that something's been implemented in the spirit of, because they are the stewards of the business. They know the business, these guys, right? And through listening to these calls, they'll know the business even better because they'll know the customer needs. And then above that, as you kind of like then pass those insights up, the command center emerges, because these insights now become live things where then you get to, companies pay like crazy amounts of money for, the voice of customer surveys and stuff like that. They have millions of conversations with their customers per week, sometimes daily, even if they're very big companies. And that's your chance, right? Like, hey, and you can't do it with humans, because what are you going to do? Everyone whose last name ends with M or S now, at the end of the call, try seeing if they'll buy like a top up to this product, or like it's hard to roll that out at scale to capture it. It's a major offensive with humans. With AI, it's very simple. It's like, hey, for 2% of the callers, see if they're interested in making a reservation for Mother's Day or Father's Day or whatever, and see how it goes. Oh, it's going well. Let's roll it out at scale. Flip 100%. It's not now staff meetings and telling everyone that they should be doing it. And it's really hard for humans to do this in practice. That's where the overabundance of technology comes with an advantage that we can't replicate with a human contact center. Because if you have very busy agents, if you tell them, hey, at the end of every call, try to sell this, but also try to pick up, 100 calls a day, like that's at odds with each other, right?
Yeah, of course.
And similar things come from like call reasons, dispositions. Agents get a drop-down list of things, and they're usually not compensated for the quality of the wrap time. Wrap time is basically the time after the call when they put in notes and call reasons and everything else that you need for these insights. Like AI, like baby steps of AI have gotten good at like doing that part a bit more automatically. But the real boost comes when you have an AI agent where you can then just immediately go back and say, okay, based on that insight, change this behavior 50-50, and show me like CSAT scores with one approach, CSAT scores with the other. You build that into a platform that the top level owner then, or whoever the right person in the contact center is, to like vary that strategy. And then you go, okay, by doing this instead of that, we've improved CSAT by 0.2, and we haven't changed, say, the resolution rate. Now, that's incredible. And it's that kind of work that's really hard to do with humans, because you also then need to do things like, account for, did you do it at the right days? Is there statistical significance? Did you just get lucky because more calls of a certain type came in and those callers are happier or angrier, right? So you need AI to kind of like just constantly like run over and say, okay, we've increased this, but the other like control group also increased. Hence, that's probably not like a valid, and the p-value of that conclusion is not sufficient. So yeah.
I mean, I think the thing what you're saying is that it seems to me that because like there's an abundance of data, but like how you take that data and start turning it into insights. Now the insights is fine, but then you don't want to be getting to a point where you end up with, oh, we're going to take these insights and we're going to run it through kind of X or Y committees. And then you kind of get it, you go, you're like, when was that insight from? Oh, it was from last quarter. We're past it now. It's like, it's done. So actually kind of what you want to do is almost get to the point where you're collapsing the time between insight and action. But that can only really come through basically developing a culture of almost experimentation.
Yeah. You need a self-learning contact center with the right humans in the loop, right? Not that committee. There's no time for that committee, because you can have a committee for like the major decisions from automation and stuff, but by and large, the people on the ground should be empowered. This is true in like most fields of of life, right? Like empower the right people, not like the commanders in chief to opine on things that they have no business opining on.
Yeah. And so the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you did also mentioned another piece of research, and I wanted to sort of ask about that, but also about kind of how your technology is dealing with that, because that they're sort of complementary kind of bits. And so you found a piece of research, whereas on the customer side, well, also kind of, and also customer and the sort of agent side, that some of the interactions are becoming increasingly contentious. Where you got like the research you quoted was, I don't know if it was, I think it's your research as well. It's 43% of customers now admit to yelling or raising their voices during customer service interactions. And that's up from like 35% in 10 years ago.
Yep.
And that takes a toll. I mean, it's just like an additional thing. I mean, agent attrition is a big residual hangover in the contact center sort of like space. So first of all, it's like, well, one, what's going on here, what's driving this kind of behavior, and two, I also wanted to help me understand that you've got this capabilities within your technology that's shielding or start helping to shield agents from that sort of abuse. I want to understand how that kind of works and stuff. So
yeah. So the one thing to say is in practice, it's hard like to be preachy about this, because like, yeah, people are undoubtedly behaving far worse in these interactions than they did 10 years ago. And it was never great, right?
And it's a multi-factored kind of like thing going on there. It's not.
Well, it's really kind of like what you said, like the world's getting more complicated. Things are harder. People are, in a squeeze. They're struggling with it. They're busy. It's confusing, maybe in some cases, the thing they're calling about, or just flat out, like they're calling because something went wrong. Like there's a gas leak, or they don't have electricity or internet, right? And they have to get on a Zoom call. Like that thing alone must have added so much in terms of the calls where people are really, really, you can't blame them. Like they have to be at work, and now they've been told to work from home, and at home, they don't control the network. At work, if it stops working, it's really not their fault. There's not much they can do about it. At home, they accept the liability for that, and that's
well, their facilities and IT and ops and that the whole thing of their own kind of little ink.
Yeah. I mean, if you really think about everyone focuses on the positives of it, but it's a bit of that like gig economy, like an Uber driver, where hey, it's your car, your problem. If your engine explodes, it's on you, not on the company to provide you a new vehicle, right? So similarly, like, I don't know, that's like one of the drivers for a lot of, for example, telcos and utility companies. The pressure is just higher, but you get to make a decision during the automated phone call around like who you fast track, who you don't fast track, who you might choose not to service as a call. In the delivery scenario, if someone's calling and being quite abusive and insisting that even though their package arrives on, say, Friday, they're calling on Wednesday and being like, I have to get it tomorrow. Like, maybe you can, maybe you can't help them, right? But depending on their disposition and stuff, you may choose on a busy day to either pass them through to a human or to redirect them to the online tool where, they can't change the date. And you've told them they can't change the date, right? So again, like it is not a simple question. There's no like single right answer. It is for the CX leader to look at different customer segments. It is for the business to look at what they're worth to the company. And everyone at some point chooses that there are groups of customers that they will or will not serve, right? Pubs will definitely tolerate a group of 5 men who are 5 pints in and being a bit loud, right? That is like kind of what it's built for, right? But if you have 15 and people are getting sick, then they're probably going to ask them to leave, right? So I think similarly, back in the theme of that command center, it's on us to give you the tools to make those decisions, right? And you choose who you serve and how you serve them, right?
And so that's the kind of that's the capability around to just sensing the sentiment and the disposition of the kind of caller in the initial kind of bit of, and you can then intelligently make decisions about what to do with them. That's kind of basically how you're doing it. Because I know that I wanted to better understand that, because I know that there's other technology around in there kind of the voice sort of space that is trying to change the tone of people.
We've done so much on that, right? And it's like a personal kind of like pet project of mine for many years. There are very good uses for it. By and large, it's mostly vendors just talking very abstract terms. Because the truth is, if you call me, I'm the agent, you just called me, and you're very angry that, I charged you twice for something. like, listen, you're in the right to be angry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, whether you in that heat of the moment can separate the fact that I am just Nikola Mrkšić, an employee of that company, here to do the best I can do for you with the tools I've been given. That's like on you, right? On me is to be patient, to try to provide that service, right? But me changing my tone, like to get you to calm down or whatever, it's babying, right? People who are calling and deciding to be abusive, well, like they've decided to be abusive, right? There are situations where a change of tone can be phenomenal. We have a client where about 12% of the calls have to do with inheritance and bereavement, right?
Right.
That same customer has a large, probably 20, 30% of the callers where it's an award checker and they can, we have calls where we're telling people that they want like hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, right? So that conversation is very jubilant. And we as an agent are like, hey, I have phenomenal news. You won £3 million, right? Like, and we changed the tone and we're excited. We shouldn't really say that with a flat tone. Whereas if you tell us you just lost a family member, then the system has a somber voice, slowly, patiently, very high. Like basically the settings change where it gets a lot easier to escalate to a human,
Yeah.
right? And again, that really just matters because you should do the best job you can for every customer, depending on their circumstances as well. The whole like someone's like aggravated. You know what? Most people calling customer service are aggravated, right? And the other thing is like what aggravated means is culturally different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being Serbian, my like what sounds aggravated to a Brit or to an American may be just like an average day, right? Whereas like the level, the sensitivity with a Brit is much, much higher, right? Like a smaller dose of it indicates maybe a very high level of
Mm-hmm.
aggravation. So again, to me, it goes back to what the product needs to do. And like if someone's really at their wits' end and them feeling like the last, kind of like blow, the final blow is, oh, now you won't even pick up my phone call and I have to speak to an AI. It doesn't matter if that AI can do it. It matters what their perception is, which is that AI can't do this, right?
Yes.
We collectively, our competitors, everyone, have not earned the right to say that AI is better than humans. It's not because it's not integrated. It's often not better yet in terms of like the conversational piece. So, the business should know and just like hand off. You're not gonna like change their entire disposition on a bad day by what mirroring their like are you gonna mirror their aggravation? Are you gonna yell back at them, right? Like so like to me, and I don't really see I've never seen anything other than the bereavement scenario done really well where I go like, wow, this made like the technology way better. And for the most part, it's just like fudging. And I don't love that. I think the more interesting thing is kind of like pairing people with the right agent, right? And this applies for both human and automated agents. So to the best of my knowledge, we're the only ones running automated systems with dozens of voices, right? So, you feel like it's automated especially if it's something you call often, right? Either to like, I don't know, make reservations or account management or even just to check the account balance if you're a bank member. People still do that, right? And people who think of this future world where there's no phone number should really take that into account. Like many, like serious, 10% plus of the entire population primarily checks their bank balances by calling, right? So when you think of like more advanced, complicated things being done fully online, like you're deliberately, it's almost like an accessibility issue. Some
Mm-hmm.
say preference, but it's also accessibility, right? If you've had a stroke and you can't use an application, like, voice is really good. Like it makes a lot of sense,
I don't
right?
know. I mean, I think the thing is that there's a wild statistic that says 20% of the world's population suffer from some sort of disability.
Yeah.
Whether it's, mental or physical or sensory or whatever it might be. And so that's a big group of people that if you're always, if you're always designing for something for based on some big fat assumptions that's about going, oh, this is about this, but it's only for
Yeah.
fully abled people,
Yeah.
then it's like going, you're missing a huge chunk of the population.
I mean, look, back to just like, you look at like multicultural societies we live in, right? I moved to the UK when I was 18. Whenever I go to like identification verification, it's like, what's your last name? Mrkšić. Like, good luck with that, right? So you have to build technology that has like these levels of escalation where you build for the entirety of the world, and the world is complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are complex Slavic last names with insufficient numbers of vowels in them, right? To do that well, you're just going to have to take it one step at a time. So, look, all we do is digital transformation, but it has to make sense for the business and its end customers. And they can't really jump 3 generations into the future without taking their customers on with them.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the thing is that, like I say, I've said often, is that I say to people that, the future of customer experience is always built in the present. Because if you don't attend to problems that your customers have today, then you potentially forfeit the right to build on that relationship tomorrow.
For sure.
And that's the truth.
I mean, that trust is hard earned, so like it's also easily lost. So
exactly. So, Nikola, we've got an example of somebody that you think actually they're doing this command center thing. They're got it all kind of lined up. They're kind of like, and they're producing kind of great returns. Just as almost give us an idea of like, the art of the possible kind of here.
Absolutely. I mean, look, a lot of the examples that I mentioned today come from our customers, right? One is a leading global kind of like delivery and logistics company. Another one is one of the largest utility companies in the US. One is pan-European global kind of like systemic bank. One is one of the largest insurers in America. So they're all doing it, right? And it's just really like slowly merging with the contact center, right? Where, I was very proud when I walked into like this is the pan-European bank. And I saw that part of their like mega screen is now the interface, right? That we've built. It's
Right.
our earned the right to live there and to be looked at daily, every minute by people, right? So it has to go like that, and it has to become like an essential part of the day to earn to be part of that real estate there, right? So that bank is UniCredit, for instance, and they've done a phenomenal job, and we're rolling out with them in kind of like all the countries that they're operating in. So yeah, the other example of the kind of like interactive ability to do it would be, say, the UK has 40,000 pubs. We are probably getting close to double-digit percentages operating our systems. It's hard to get them all because many are independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you look at that, like before Mother's Day, Father's Day, with a lot of the groups, like things like Woodbread or Green King or Big Table Group, Kot, Brasserie, a few others. You might say, hey, do you want to book for Mother's Day? And many people don't do it in time, right?
Yeah.
Restaurants are hugely over-provisioned for these dates. They're major money makers outside of the Christmas period, right? So you might say, hey, if you come between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., we're gonna give you a round of drinks for free. And a lot of people just say yes. Something like 13% of the people offered this say yes. Now, these are people who will later on book somewhere over lunch. Because most people want to, maybe dinner. Like 3 p.m. is an awkward time, but maybe people say yes and they do it. You're increasing the occupancy throughout the day where people are already there between lunch and dinner waiting, primed, right? And you increase the revenue by a crazy amount, something like 13% for the day.
Right.
Given that the day carries a lot of the profit for the month, anyways, this is huge, right? So I love those examples because it illustrates just how you can like create a thing that would be pretty hard to roll out. Because most of these kind of like pubs, restaurants, they miss 20 to 30% of the calls on a given day.
Right.
So rather than just not missing calls, you start having like extremely primed and ready people picking up the phone in a way that operationally they can never just do, right? So
yeah, because they don't have anybody kind of like, if you ever try to call a pub anyway, and then kind of like, and particularly if it's busy, it's like they don't have anybody, generally don't have anybody there who's going to dedicated to pick up the phone or man the tills or whatever, because everybody's like all hands on decks. And if you're lucky enough to get somebody, you pick up the phone, go like, hello, and there's noise in the background.
Absolutely. I mean, it's part of the experience, but it's not necessarily a good part of the pub experience, which
No.
I otherwise love. And like you miss out on things because you don't have this like pan enterprise visibility. For instance, we've noticed that we're saying no to a lot of like last minute calls on Saturday evenings. Turns out that you have table configurations, and they're often like configurable, right? So someone calls, do you have a table for 10? They look around, no. But really what they don't want is, it's usually a group of 10 men who are already a few drinks in, looking for the next place. And they bring up a few places just to see where they can go. These are hugely profitable groups because they're going to go and like do rounds, and there'll be like 10 times 10, 100 pints sold, right? Like, it's profitable. They want that group. And a lot of the times the regional kind of like managers were just blocking them off and not making it configurable because, like, their life is easier if these people don't show up. So we just made that change at root level, in kind of like in the back end, and now it's available, and the system says yes, and they show up, and it's like, okay, I have a booking for 10. I don't have a table for 10, but I have a table for 6 and a 6 and a 4. All right, put them together, right? So you can move the choice there. And, it might not be bad intent. It might just be like, like practical consideration, people not going the extra mile, but it helps them make a lot of extra money. So that's that kind of like superpowers that AI provides. People just think of cost cutting. The truth is, you probably won't have picked up anyway. Or if you pick up, you might say no. And honestly, if you just like pick it up, it's a better experience for the customer, and it makes the operation far better without like putting anyone's job at risk, because they don't have anyone they're picking up the phone to begin with.
Yeah, sure. So, Nikola, there anything else you'd like to add before I just kind of conscious of time, just looking at time now? Anything else you'd like to add before I ask you some quick fire kind of like wrap up questions?
No. Go ahead.
Right. So a few quick fire questions from me. So we've talked about a bunch of kind of different things, and so I always ask people to boil it down. And so if I was to say to you, what's your best advice to someone listening to this who wants to improve their customer experience? And what would it be? I mean, I'd ask people to do it by completing this sentence, which says, if you want to improve your customer experience, Nikola says, do this, ... Complete that sentence.
Yeah. Don't take the smallest baby step possible, which these days manifests as assistive tools that make agents a bit better. Imagine this world where it is largely automated, not fully automated, but largely automated with human escalation. Imagine that world and start working towards it, because the roadmap to building that is not the same as something that lives on an agent screen and tells them how to do their job better. It's not the right transformation. It kind of like anchors you further in the human first world rather than in this like AI hive mind followed by really highly paid knowledge workers above. So start automating the phone now. Don't distract yourself with chat or with assistive tools for voice.
Perfect. Thank you. And second one is, I couldn't fail to ask you a punk related question, given this is the Punk CX podcast, but what company or brand do you think is taking a more of a punk approach to customer experience, and why?
Punk approach. Well, what a good question. A punk approach. What do you mean with a punk approach?
Well, I mean, like, how kind of punk is about, it's like making a statement, right? It's trying to do something different. So it's kind of swim against the grain. It's trying to strip things back to its bare essentials. It's trying to make it short and punchy, all of those different things. So, something that is almost like antithetical to kind of where things currently are, but they do it and it works, and it's and for them it makes sense, and for the customers it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our customers, Landry's or Caesars come to mind. These big like or Boyd Gaming, these big like Vegas groups, which used to like really go human first on the phones and stuff, and now they're like fully switched to like assistants that do this work. I don't know if it qualifies as punk, or maybe it's like shameless self-advertising. I think others that do it well that are not our customers. I mentioned Revolut. I think Revolut's a good example, right? It's not something that is at all aligned with our product roadmap in that they're really chat first, but that's the way to do it. I think that they're being very honest with themselves around the demographic they're trying to serve, and they're making a deliberate bet on it. Them having a strong point of view, it'll change if they want to capture the whole market. But I like what they're doing because at least they're very, forthright and a lot of others talk about doing voice well, but then they don't, and they hope it will just go away miraculously. So yeah, they're a good example, I think.
Excellent, thank you. And then final question before we wrap up. As we talked about, the world's a complex kind of place, and getting more complex, and a and it's kind of slightly, well, it's not slightly weird, it's weird at times. And the news is populated with all sorts of, well, it's just like bad news. So I'm looking for a good news story to finish the podcast on. So we finish on a high. So Nikola, before we wrap up, tell me a good news story. Tell me about a thing that you've seen over the last, say, week or so that you just thought that's made you smile, or it's interesting. You're like going, oh, that's really positive.
Oof. These are difficult rapid fire questions.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you a story because it's like, and it's a distraction for me. The thing that's going to make me kind of like smile right now is like my wife's sister's partner, Mattia, he was Italian, and he is rooting for Napoli, and Napoli are just edging a little bit further away from Inter in the kind of the Serie A sort of like championship race. And that's really kind of like, I'm really rooting for him because so that's, and they're starting to make that work. And it's even more interesting is that because they've just had 2 Scottish players kind of sign from this year. Scott McTominay from Manchester United, who I have no idea why Man United sold him. And also Billy Gilmore, who is a former Brighton and Hove Albion kind of player who I'm a supporter of, and he's doing kind of quite well over there, although he's not first choice, but he's coming on regularly off the bench. And so they're doing really well. And so I'm rooting for Mattia and Napoli, and also kind of the 2 Scottish brethren that are a part of kind of Conte's kind of Napoli side. So I hope they're successful. Now, I hope that's not contentious to anybody, but that's just like what I'm feeling good about right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that when your teams are doing well, that always just brings us this. I mean, that's why we follow the sports, right? Yeah, I think like for me, like really just on a personal level, a lot of good stuff. I have 2 small kids, which kind of like fills my days with like a lot of joy and a lot of like kind of like fun playing stuff. They're 2 and 1, so I'm really kind of like between that and company of 250 people. I'm just trying to stay alive, right? But yeah, I mean, here a piece of good news for me. I'm Serbian and I live in the UK. My wife's half Serbian, but never lived in Serbia. So my big kind of like thing was, will I manage to get my kids to speak both Serbian and English, right? And just this weekend, like my daughter started like on command switching between one language to the other, depending on what I speak. Like fully perfectly, she mixes the words from both delightfully. But I was like, okay, it sounds like a kid's brain is really like that fascinating and strong, at least hers, that I might just manage to do this while I'm still away from home a lot and not really being disciplined with speaking just one language. So I guess a weird specific one, but it filled my heart with joy because I was like, okay,
that is an awesome thing. And you just you paint a picture in people's minds, and people can see that and go, "Ah, that's just cool."
yeah.
That's
I mean,
nice.
basically, it's like I ask her like, what is this? And it'll be either like I or like Stein or Ok, right? Like, and I was like, okay, this is great. Like, and having trained neural networks a lot of my life, especially in the era of deep learning, where it stopped being like programmed logic that behaves in a certain way, but like patterns that you hope get picked up by an intelligence, whether like automatic or human. I find this like truly delightful.
That's brilliant. What a fascinating, what a brilliant story. But Nikola,
Meanwhile, maybe you edit some of it out. I don't know. Up to you.
yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, the thing is that these are all things. I mean, I think the intention at the end of these things is to tell like a new story, because one, it adds a different dimension to it. Different people going to respond in different ways, and that's kind of great. Some people find it quite hard. Some people go, "Oh, yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's great." And so it can be random, and that's fine. And I want to make these podcasts not just hardcore sort of customer service, customer experience, tech, blah 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 blah, but also it's about people.
Yeah, no, for sure,
and it's about people's lives, and
yeah.
because that's what we're dealing with, because we forget that oftentimes when we talk about the experience of customers or customer experience generally, that the customer generally as a human being gets disenfranchised out of that, in oftentimes. And so I'm trying to bring the human back into it.
Yep. Awesome.
Thank you. So, that's all I have for today. I just want to say, Nikola, thank you so much for spending some time and sharing your insight and your expertise with me today. That's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinsko.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinsko.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.